Did you guys know that this quote was actually first tagged in a bathroom stall in Sydney? That's right. Its author, Irina Dunn, got a little sassy one night and decided to do some graffiti. I didn't know that until recently either, but when I found out, I was really excited because it's a perfect example of how a seemingly inconsequential, perhaps destructive act, like writing on the wall, can actually promote social change. So for the past 11 years or so, I've been talking to women from all over the world who dedicate themselves to a different kind of writing on the wall, graffiti art. These are women who lead double lives. They're citizens and they're vandals, spending their days as mothers, teachers, CEOs, and spending their nights painting their names and characters on buildings and trains in the cities in which they live. So as you can imagine, they have a really interesting perspective on things, and I get to talk to them about it. The first thing I ask is, what is it like to be a woman in a male-dominated subculture? I also ask them, what are the hazards of being a graffiti writer, like death, jail, and why would you take those risks in the name of art? And there isn't one particular reason. But think about it this way. Graffiti is a form of writing, and writing is fundamentally about communicating. So these writers are reclaiming public space. They're asserting their presence. They're saying, I was here, and here, and here, and here. And you have to be a particular kind of person to make that kind of proclamation. You have to be creative, you have to be confident, you have to be determined, and women have to be doubly so. They have to be tough, they have to be relentless, and just by doing what they do, they've taught me so much about feminism in everyday life. All by themselves, they are reshaping the aesthetic and social parameters of graffiti, as Tash unabashedly proclaimed in this piece. But I'm probably getting ahead of myself. You're wondering, how did I start this work? Most people do. Long story short, feminism changed my life. At 17, At 17, I got to college, the first in my family to do so without a direction. I didn't really have a passion for anything. But then one of my professors made me go to the Women's Resource Center. And within those walls, I learned that the personal actually was political, and further, that I could do something about those politics. And it absolutely changed me. I became a new person. Before I knew it, I was leading Take Back the Night marches, working at the Women's Center, minoring in women's studies, creating political artworks. It's safe to say people noticed. One of my other professors asked if I had considered going to graduate school for women's studies, and of course I hadn't. She said I had a flair for feminism. And she was right. Inspired by feminist greats like Audre Lorde, I was ready to burn the master's house down. So off to grad school I went. And in one of my first classes, we were talking about the lack of lesbians in art history books and museums, and that made me start thinking about an urban art form that up until that point I was mostly indifferent to, graffiti art. So yes, I hung out with my friends. They were graffiti writers. I occasionally dabbled, but I could care less. I was mostly indifferent to it until I realized there were no women, or at least I didn't know of any women. Then I became fascinated. Some might say obsessed. I asked about a woman named Ren 1 because the O's were painted as hearts. And at the time, I was told that she wasn't a real writer. Her boyfriend did her graffiti for her. And I've accepted that as truth at the time. Today, I know to be a bit more skeptical. She's actually still a mystery. So if you're out there, Ren 1, hit me up. Love to talk to you. So I did what I could to find them. I hit the books. I read everything I could find about graffiti, scouring the pages, but finding one, maybe two, repeatedly mentioned. It was absolutely dissatisfying. So I became a woman on a mission. I knew that more women had to be painting graffiti, and I made it my job to find them. So it was my thesis. Years later, it became my dissertation. And now, months away from defending that dissertation, and here speaking to you about these remarkable women. So in 2004, I brought 4 of New York City's most well-known female graffiti writers down to Tucson to paint this mural. After we were talking, Claw, 17, Lady Pink, Donia, and I were chit-chatting about feminism. I told them I was bummed out, and I was shocked because what I had found was that most graffiti writing women don't identify as feminists. And true to form, Claus spoke up right away. She said, "I don't talk about it, I be about it." And in that moment, it was like a light bulb went off. I was so busy worrying about the fact that these women didn't identify as feminists that I wasn't paying attention to what they were doing, to their actions. Once I started looking for how feminism was enacted in graffiti subculture, I found it alive and well. So one of the things about graffiti is that when I say graffiti writer, you probably think gang member, troubled teenager, maybe street artist. No matter the words, you're thinking about this guy, not that girl. So if this girl wants to be recognized, hey, I did that graffiti, it was a girl who did that, she has to mark it some way in her art. This is Miss 17. Now, she may be a miss, but she rarely finds occasion to pretty up her 1s and 7s. She is about scope, and she is about quantity. And she is called the subcultural king because people recognize her commitment. In the 90s, 17 teamed up with Claw, and naming their crew PMS, they all but ran through the streets proclaiming, "We are women, this is our space." And actually, that's exactly what they did, except without bullhorns, with spray paint. Claw is also a fashion designer, and she actually just became the first woman to design a NASCAR. It's pretty rad, right? This is MRS. She puts a bow on her M, and when we talked about it, she called it a cute accessory. The thing about this cute accessory is that without the bow, people didn't know MRS was a woman. Dana from Chile paints a self-portrait with each of her muñecas. And like MRS, she uses the least likely aesthetic to make a statement about her presence, cuteness. And I say the least likely because we don't conventionally think about cute things as powerful things. But these women are not about convention. So I wanted to meet the woman behind the muñeca. So I went to Chile in 2010, and the day I was supposed to talk to Dana, she actually went into labor. So I ended up speaking to her friends, Nazca and Chape, two of the women that make up Chile's first all-female graffiti crew. So when I met them, I didn't know any all-female graffiti crews, and I was totally stoked. This is Nazca. She told me that they started the crew because they felt isolated. And so what the all-female crew does is create a support network. And you can see how it translates in the art. These big-eyed fish and birds, they're never contained. They're always flying and floating freely in these multicolored dreamscapes. One thing about talking to Chape that she brought to my attention was motherhood. Think about it this way. Right now, we have a generation of women who are painting graffiti and teaching their children how to paint graffiti. So we have a bunch of kids running around learning about graffiti subculture through their mom and her girlfriends. And that's a fundamental cultural shift, and I can't wait to see how it plays out in 20 years. So when we're talking about all-female graffiti crews, it's not just that they're supporting and encouraging one another. They're challenging one another. They're saying, if I can do this, you can do this, and they expect their peers to rise to the occasion. And that message has gone viral. Just go to Instagram, Tumblr, search female graffiti, and you'll see what I mean. I do my best research online. I recently met Abby, one of the founding members of graffiti culture on Facebook, and that never would have happened 10 years ago. I also met Keith. She manages a blog called Ladies Graph. She also manages a Facebook group, it's private, you have to be invited, where members, there's about 300 of them, can interact in live time, they can share stories, and they can promote their events. That's right, with one status update, these women can invite writers from all over the world to come participate in their all-girl graffiti jams. And even if you can't go, you can still participate because like I can, like I do, I'm a bit of a hoarder, but this is what I do. I click and I save all of these images. I share them as much as I can. So when we're thinking about women and their visibility in graffiti culture, we can't underestimate the power of the internet, and specifically social networking, in creating this system of visibility and communication for these women. So at the end of each interview, I ask these women if they have a message for aspiring writers, and I would like to share some of those with you. This is Shiro from Japan. She says, do yourself, original style. Don't imitate somebody else. Queen Andrea says, practice, find mentors, go hard, don't stop. And finally, Busy says, painting your voice in the street is an act of courage and perseverance. Before you realize it, you're transforming your city, you're transforming yourself, transform everything around you. And in no small way, Busy is absolutely correct. Female graffiti writers are transforming graffiti culture by making their gender visible on the wall, by painting in crews, and by connecting online. But their actions have broader cultural implications. Their public, subversive, artistic acts provide a model for contemporary feminist movement. I truly believe they're part of the movement in contemporary feminist movement. And I want to thank them for that. So thank you, all of you fearless women, for sharing your stories with me on behalf of all of the women and girls who have ever been told that they shouldn't or couldn't do something simply because they were women. Thank you.